Welcome everyone back to the stream. Today is day 17 of becoming a full stack developer in 8 months, and I don't know, I didn't do this earlier, but look, I managed to trigger on dark mode today. I'm a sucker for dark mode, so I don't know why I didn't do that earlier, but nevertheless, we're continuing today with form basics. Now let me just open up the chat so I can read your guys' messages if you have any. Right, that seems good, and I'm mostly done with this. What was left is that form course that I was thinking about doing. So I don't know how long this is. There are just different articles, I guess. So probably today is not going to be too interesting of a stream as well if I'm going to be reading through all of these articles, but I want to get as much information as possible on all the topics. No matter if I know CSS already and HTML, I want to get my foundations really secure and strong. So I'm probably going to be reading through those articles, and I hope they're not too boring for you guys. But after we're done with that, we're going to be making more projects soon, and this is going to be very exciting. So, welcome to Learn Forms. This course breaks down HTML forms into easy to understand pieces. Over the next few modules, you'll learn how an HTML form works and how to use them effectively in your projects. Use the menu pane by the Learn Forms logo to navigate the modules. You'll learn how to build basic HTML form. You'll learn how to build a basic HTML form, about HTML form elements, styling forms, help users re-entering data, ensuring the form is accessible and secure, how to test your forms, and about specific form types. Okay, each module is full of interactive demos and self-assessments for you to test your knowledge. This course is suitable for beginners and advanced HTML developers. The first few modules help you get started with building HTML forms. The other modules give you more detail. You can go through the series from start to finish to get a general understanding about HTML forms, or pick a specific module if you want to learn more about that. So, prerequisites. Before starting this module, you should know HTML. For those new to web development, check out the HTML intro. Okay. For most demos, we use CodePen. Looking at the demos, you might wonder where the styles come from. We use a general style sheet included in all demos, so the only relevant styles are shown there. In CodePen, you can select included CSS files from settings. Alright, I don't know if I'm going to be going through the CodePen, but we'll see about that. Alright, so anyways, we have form controls and form fields. A form control is an element that enables user interaction and data entry or selection. An input, select text area or button. Sometimes form field is used to refer to form controls, in particular elements for text entry, input and text area. And here's what you learn. This is use forms to get data from users, help users enter data in forms, help users avoid re-entering data in forms, help users enter the right data in forms, test your forms, design basics, accessibility, internalization and localization, security and privacy, autofill, how to test forms for usability, test forms across devices and platforms, gathering data, the form element in depth, form fields in depth, form attributes in depth, styling forms, styling form controls, JavaScript, payment forms, address forms, conclusion and next steps. So there is indeed quite a bit of learning here, quite a bit to learn, so let's get straight into it. I think it will be fun. Now, wait, they got me with that. That was really interesting. What was that? Lean in forms, get started on glitch. Right, anyway, so use forms to get data from users. Learn the basics of using a form on the web with this introduction to the form element. Imagine you want to ask people on your website about their favorite animal. As a first step, you need a way to collect the data. How do you do this with HTML? So what is your favorite animal? A cat. Good choice. Cat is a great animal. In HTML, you can build this using the form element, an input and a label, and a submit button. For sure. So what is a form element? This is the form outlined, and the form element consists of a starting tag, form, optional attributes defined in the start tag, and an end tag form. Between the start and the end tag, you can include form elements like input and text area for different types of user input. You will learn more about form elements in the next module. Alright, so use HTTPS to protect all websites and forms, not only if you handle sensitive data. This way all data is encrypted. Find out more. Okay. When a form is submitted, for example, when the users click on the submit button, the browser makes a request. A script can respond to that request and process the data. By default, the request is made to the page where the form is shown. So if you want a script running at HTTPS web.dev to process the form data, how would you do that? Try it out. So they say by default the request is made to the page where the form is shown. So if my form is shown on web.dev, I wouldn't need to add the link, but otherwise it would be with action, and in the action like parent or colons, you would type HTTPS web.dev. There is a try it out section. So here we'll say HTTPS web.dev, and that should be it. Now, is there a way to test it? It will send you to web.dev with animal equals cat. Alright, so let's toggle the answer. You can select the location of the script by using the action attribute. So this is what we just did. The preceding example makes a request to example.com/animals. A script on the example.com backend can handle the request to animals. Hello my friend, how are you doing today? How are the spirits? What time also is it where you are? For me it's still early, it's 6:40 in the morning. How is data then transferred? So I remember actually, just on that point, I remember when I was using Spring and Java, we had to make those endpoints to handle data. So you do this in the backend. How is data transferred? By default, form data is sent as a GET request with the submitted data appended to the URL. If a user submits frog in the example above, the browser makes a request to the following URL. Hello brother, MySQL coding, how's it going, my man? Truly appreciate you for tuning in. Once again, have a I think it's afternoon for you, my brother, but yeah, have a good day ahead, I guess. Alright, get request. In this case, you can access data on the front end or the back end by getting the data from the URL. If you want, you can instruct the form to use a post request by changing the method attribute. Do you usually go through all the additional resources of the modules? Hi there, it's just Stanley. Thank you for tuning in, my guy. Yes, I try to do that. I try to go through all the resources. I guess for me there is really not a point to rush it. I already know, for example, how to build forms. I've built many forms before, and I generally know all the components and how it works, but I'm still going through all the additional resources to kind of create a strong foundation and build on top of it, I guess. So yeah, I do try to go through all of the resources. Using post, the data is included in the body of the request. The data will not be visible in the URL and can only be accessed from a front-end or back-end script. The body of the request, HTTP request, sure. So what method should you use? There are use cases for both methods. For forms that process sensitive data, use the post method. The data is encrypted if you want to use HTTPS and only accessible by the backend script that processes the request. The data is not visible in the URL. A common example is a sign-in form. If the data is shareable, you can use the get method. This is the way the data will be added to your browser history as it is included in the URL. Search forms often use this. This is the way you can bookmark a search result page. Okay, now that you've learned about the form element itself, it's time to learn about form fields to make your forms interactive. Check your understanding, test your knowledge. Okay, so we'll go through the assessments as well. What does the start tag of the form element look like? What attribute can you use to define where the form is processed? Action. What is the default request method get? Alright, so this is all done and we are 2 out of 24. On to the next article. Help users enter data in forms. Okay. To make a form interactive, you need to add form elements. There are controls to enter and select data, elements that describe controls, elements that group fields, and buttons to submit a form. What are form elements? Input type file, ID of photo. Okay. You see two input elements, input type text and input type file. Why do they look different? Based on the event element name and type attribute. Browsers show different user interfaces, use different validation rules, and provide many other features. Using the appropriate form control helps you build better forms. The default styles of form controls differ between browsers, operating system, and platforms. You'll learn in a later module how to style cross-platform. Okay. Someone just subscribed, I just saw. Thank you so much, my guy, whoever you are. Mwah, thank you so much. Labels for form elements. Say you want to add an input where the user can enter their favorite color. For this, you need to add an input element to your form. But how does the user know what they should fill in their favorite color? To describe form controls, use a label for each form control. So they add here a label, and in the for attribute they add the ID of the input they want the label to refer to, and they describe basically what the input is for. The for attribute on the label element matches the ID. Right. Describe every form control with a label rather than using some other HTML element. This makes the form control accessible to screen readers and provides a bigger target, since you can tap or click the label to set focus on the control. Click the label in our demo to try this out. So here I'm clicking on the label and it's focusing on the input field. And also if it's a label, then screen readers can read that. Someone just unsubscribed, but it's okay. No worries there. It wasn't meant to be. Capturing user input. As the name suggests, the input element is used to gather input from users. So what's your favorite car? I think I've read through this already. Who gets higher salary, front end, back end for sure. The name attribute. Use the name attribute to identify the data the user enters with the control. If you submit the form, the name is included in the request. Say you named the form control mountain and then the user entered Gutenberg. The request includes this information as mountain Gutenberg. Try to change the name of the form control to hill. If you do this correctly and submit the form, hill is visible to the URL. Okay, so it works like a key value pair basically, and here the name is the key and whatever you input into here will be the value. So if you do hill and then Everest, you get it in the URL. So a key value pair basically. Let me leave all these code pens. Okay. The input type. There are different types of form controls, all with user built-in features that work across different browsers and platforms. Based on the type attribute, the browser renders different user interfaces, shows different on-screen keyboards, uses different validation rules and more. See how to change the type. Okay. By using type checkbox, the browser now renders a checkbox instead of a text field. The checkbox also comes with additional attributes. You can set the checked attribute to show it as checked. If there are various other types, you can choose. We have a detailed look in a later module. Allow multiple lines of text. So this is the text area basically. Pick from a list of options. This is the select with option. First as the select, you can connect a label with the ID. In between the start and the end tag of the select element, you can add multiple option elements. So those will be the drop down options. Pretty straightforward. We've already read through that yesterday. Pre-select an option, you have to add the selected attribute here if you want a specific color. In this example is pink to be pre-selected. Okay. Grouping form controls. Sometimes you need to group form controls. You can use the field set element to do that. So what is your favorite web technology? And they have radio buttons. Yesterday we found out that field set should be used with radio buttons to use them, and use the legend element to put a label on the field set or on the group of radio buttons actually. So this we already know. And then submitting a form. After learning how to add form controls and group them, you may wonder how a user can submit a form. The first option is to use a button element. After user clicks the submit button, the browser makes a request to the URL specified in the form elements action attribute. This button though has to be inside of the form element, and I think it has to also have a type of submit. You can also, if it's an input, it has to have type submit, but you can just leave it as a button, I guess. Input looks like and behaves just like a button. Instead of using label element to describe the input, use the value attribute instead. Alright. Sure, now check your understanding. How do you connect a label to a form control? So we should look for ID, I think it's this one, name cover on the label, and for, yep. What do you do for a multi-line form control? I think they need a text area. How can you submit a form? Clicking on input element with type submit. I think one of 4 correct answers. So this is a little bit tricky because they said all of the above, but we actually have to click them all. Alright, so we're done with that. Next, help users avoid re-entering data in forms. Help users avoid re-entering data in forms. After learning about the form element and how to make a form interactive, let's see how you can help users avoid re-entering data, make most of autofill. Filling out forms can be time consuming. For example, re-entering your address repeatedly on every site where you want to buy something is not a great shopping experience. Autofill can help you there. You enter your address once. From now on, your browser will offer you the option to fill in the same address for other forms automatically. You move to another city. Don't worry about getting the old addresses as an option forever. You can edit the address data in your browser. Has saved it for you to keep it up to date. Browsers also help with remembering data. You sign up for a website. For the password field, you get the option to generate and store a secure password. If you want to log in later at the same site, your browser offers you this option to fill in the stored password. How does autofill work in the browser? An address field can look very different on different websites. How does a browser know what is in an address field? Browsers use heuristics. I don't know how to pronounce this word, but they use that to identify an address field. What are the values of name, type, and ID attributes? Is there an autocomplete attribute present on the form control? So I didn't know about the autocomplete attribute, but probably it's on by default. Based on this information, browser can offer the option to autofill a field with previously entered data on the same type, Browsers can even offer to autofill an entire form. Okay, help browsers with autofill. Let's see what you can do to help browsers offer the correct autofill options. Use sensible attribute values. As you learned, browsers can identify the data type by looking at the attributes of a form control. So you have type of email, name email, ID of email. Do you have a field where your users should enter their email addresses? Use email as a value for the name, ID, and type attribute. 3 hints for the browser that this is an email field. Alright, sure. Pretty straightforward. The autocomplete attribute. There are other examples where it can be hard for browsers to identify the data type solely from the name, ID, and type attributes. You can help here by using the autocomplete attribute. So what they do here is autocomplete equals name, which I guess it's like a keyword, and they can help browsers and tell them sort of what to autofill in here. Have you entered a name before in the browser you're using? The browser will probably offer you the option to fill it in again. for this field in the demo. You can learn more about the autocomplete and autofill in a later module. Alright, so we'll wait for that. Based on which attributes is autofill ordered, so offered, it is all of the above, isn't it? The name, the type, and the autocomplete. So use autofill offered. Correct browsers offer autofill based on this attribute among others. So maybe I should have clicked all of the above, but that's what I was trying to do. So anyways, we're done with that as well. Help users enter the right data in forms. So browsers have built-in features for validation to check that users have entered data in the correct format. You can activate these features by using the correct elements and attributes. On top of that, you can enhance form validations with CSS and JavaScript. Know that this module is about form validation on the front end. You must also make sure to validate data before storing or sharing it in your backend server. Why should you validate your forms? You learned in the previous module how to help users avoid having to repeatedly re-enter information in forms. How can you help users enter data that's valid? It's frustrating to fill out a form without knowing which fields are required or the constraints of those fields. For example, you enter a username and submit a form only to find out that this username must have at least 8 characters. You can help users with that by defining validation rules and communicating them. Help users from accidentally missing required fields. So you can use HTML to specify the correct format and constraints of data entered in your forms. You also need to specify which fields are mandatory. So this name is required, and now if I try to submit it, it will give me this alert, this pop-up that please fill out this field. And also to be better read and understood, here you have required in parentheses. Try to submit this form without entering any data. Do you see an error message attached to the input telling you that the field is required? That happens because of the required attribute. So not because they have required here in parentheses, but because they have required as an attribute. Okay. Different browsers use different text for error messages. The wording is also dependent on the browser language of the user. If you use Safari and your preferred browser language is German, you get a different error message than a user in Chrome with English as their chosen browser language. If you find out how to change the default error messages with JavaScript later in this module. You already learned that you can use many more types, for example type email. Let's have a look at the required email input. So if you submit it, again, please fill out this form. Let me have a quick sip of coffee. So again, try to submit this form without entering any data. Is there any difference from the demo before? Now insert your name in the email field and try to submit. You see a different error message. How is that possible? Alright, so please include an at, and before that was please fill out this field. So this is because of the form validation that's included by default. The required attributes tells the browser that the field is mandatory. The browser also tests if the entered data matches the format of the type. The email field shown in the example is only valid if it's not empty and if the entered data is a valid email address. help the user enter the correct format. You learn how to make a field mandatory. How would you instruct the browser that the user must enter at least 8 characters for a form field? So you can either do that, or you can do a little box underneath that says, again, when you start typing it, it will pop up and it will say make the password is weak, for example, make it at least 8 characters, or the password is medium, and so on and so forth, like it's in WordPress. Give the demo a try. After your change, you should not be able to submit the form if you enter less than 8 characters. Oops. Right, so min length 8, I wouldn't have known that, so the name of the attribute is min length, set to the value of 8, and you have the desired validation rule. If you want the opposite, use max length. So if you use max length, you will not be able to put more than 8 characters, let's say. But I didn't know about that, so that's good. Communicate your validation rules, and here we have the div with the idea of password min length, and it says enter at least 8 characters. Alright. Make sure all users understand your validation rules. For this, connect the form control with an element that explains the rules. To do so, add area described by attribute to the form element with the ID of the form. I didn't see that described by. So they're attaching this div with the ID of password min length by the area described by. That's interesting. So instead of like a label, they use a div, and then by this area described by, they attach it. Pattern attribute. Sometimes you want to define more advanced validation rules. Again, you can use HTML attribute. It's called pattern, and you can define a regular expression as a value. So I guess you can do the validations for the emails yourself, maybe, and just use the pattern if that wasn't built in. Here only lowercase letters are allowed if the user has to enter, and the user has to enter at least 2 characters and not more than 20. How do you change the pattern to also allow uppercase letters? It will be capital A dash capital Z after that. Total answer is I didn't realize the answer was already here. Alright, so adding styles. You have now learned how to add validation in HTML. Wouldn't it be great if you could also style form controls based on the validation status? It is possible with CSS. How to style a required form field. Show the user that a field is mandatory before they interact with your form. Okay. 2 pixels solid. I guess if that was like red color, or it would have been more pronounced, but you can style it with the required pseudo class. Style invalid form controls. Again, style it with the invalid pseudo class. And let's see, validation with JavaScript. To further enhance validation of your forms, you can use JavaScript constraint validation API. So provide meaningful error messages. You learned before that error messages are not identical in every browser. You can show the same message. How can you show the same message to everyone? To achieve this, use the set custom validity method of the constraint validation API. Let's see how this works. So they get the name input in a const with the document.query selector and select the form that has a attribute of name equals to name, and then they add an event listener for invalid. So whenever that form becomes invalid, they set custom validity to please enter your name, and in that case when I click submit, it will say here please enter your name instead of this field cannot be empty and so on. Alright, perfect. Query the element where you want to set the custom error message. Listen to the invalid element of your defined element. There set your message with the set custom validity. This example shows the message please enter your name if the input is invalid. Open the demo in different browsers. You should see the same error message everywhere. There is much more you can do with the constraint validation API. You'll find a detailed look at it using validation with JavaScript in a later module. How to validate in real time. You can add real-time validation in JavaScript by listening to the onboard event of a form control and validate the input immediately when the user leaves a form field. So now I've already done it, but you can focus it and then click off or switch to a different input, and it will say in real time please fill out this field, which is very nice. And they listen for where is that? Add event listener for blur. So if you click out of it, you're like blurring it, and if you click on it, you're focusing onto it. Click the form field in the demo, enter web, and click somewhere else on the page. You see the native error message for min length below the form field. So already understand how that will work. Learn more about implementing real-time validation with JavaScript in an upcoming module. So again, check your understanding, and let's do this quickly. What attribute do you use to make form controls mandatory? It's required. Is it possible to define your own error messages? Yes, with this API. An input with type of email and the required attribute can be submitted if the value is a valid email address. Yep. Alright, so we're done with this. Once again, test your forms. Let me see what that is. Okay, in previous modules you learned how to build a form. Help users avoid re-entering data, and how to validate form data. How can you now make sure the form is usable? You can test and analyze your form to answer this question. So does your form work on other devices? You begin by confirming that your form is working on your own device. However, there are many types of devices your users may use. You can test if your form, how can you test if your form works with other devices? First, test your form on a desktop device, then try only using your keyboard. Next, test it on a phone. You have now tested your form with different input methods, keyboard, touch and mouse, with different screen sizes, different browsers and different operating systems. Do you have more devices that you can test on? Test your form on all of them. The more different devices, browsers, browser versions and operating systems you can test on, the better. You can also test a service. You can also use a test service to test your form on lots of different web browsers, different browser versions, different devices and different operating systems. Browser Stack offers free test accounts for open source projects to enable testing on different browsers, devices, and operating systems. Very cool. Okay. How can you test if your form works for others? Your first form is ready, you spent a lot of time making sure it works well. How can you confirm that your form is usable for everybody else? As a first step, you can ask your friends and colleagues to fill out your form. Sit next to each other or share a screen. This way you can see how they interact with your form, watch them fill out the form, ask them to say out loud what they are doing and if they're experiencing any problems. After they complete the task, ask them questions. Was it clear what they should fill out? Did they have any issues filling out the form? Was anything unclear? These questions help you build even better forms. So that is testing 101 basically. People from all over the world will use your form. Do you have an address field in your form? Google a city you always wanted to visit and search for a resort restaurant there. Now enter the address of the restaurant in your address field. The format of the address may be totally different from the address format where you live. Test with different data to ensure your form can handle diverse formats. How can you measure how your form performs? If I say form once more, like if I had to take a shot for every time I said form, I would be at rolling on the floor at the moment. So you confirm that your form is usable for other people. As a next step, you should measure how your form performs. There are free tools available for this. Let's have a look at some of them. You should always measure before and after you change your form. This way you can compare the results, measure the impact of your change, and determine improvements. Page Speed Insights measures the performance of your site and gives you hints how to improve it. Okay, so I'm already using Page Speed Insights Lighthouse. I thought those are the same stuff. Maybe Lighthouse is the one built into the browser actually, but they kind of do the same thing, but Page Speed Insights goes more in depth. Tools to identify common issues. There are many tools to identify common issues. One way is to use the Form Troubleshooter extension. It warns you about missing autocomplete attributes, non-standard attributes, missing or empty labels, and more. Alright, so that is pretty useful actually. I can later use it on my e-commerce site to test out the forms. You can also use an accessibility evaluation tool like Wave or Axe. These tools notify you about missing labels, missing connections between labels and form controls, insufficient color contrast, and many more accessibility issues. How can you monitor from experience? Monitoring real user experience of your forms helps you identify new issues quickly. Let's see how you can monitor your form. So again, those are the same PSI and Lighthouse. Google Analytics, so on and so forth. What is field data? Data from real users and from real conditions. RUM collects metrics form. RUM. Alright, so I skipped that, I think, on RUM. There was a note that I missed. Monitoring the real world experience of your users is sometimes called real user monitoring. Real user monitoring collects performance metrics directly from the end user's browser. RUM data shows how your site performs and how real users interact with it. So if you run a page speed insights, if your website is not very new and people have used it, you'll be able to see this real users metrics. Was it monitoring data? Real users and browsers from end users. Alright, so we're done with that as well, and I'm quickly taking a 10-minute break and I'll be right back with you guys. Thank you so much. Be right back. Alright everyone, I'm back right on time, and we're up to design basics, so we're going to quickly read through that. In the first section you learned how to build a basic form. This section is all about best practices. In this module, learn about user experience and why a well implemented user interface can make a big difference. So creating user-friendly interfaces. Filling out forms can be time-consuming and frustrating. It doesn't have to be. To guarantee a great UX, make sure the UI is intuitive. Ensure you deliver optimal form structure and graphic design, layout, spacing, font size and color, and logical UI such as label, wording, and appropriate input types. Let's have a look how you can improve your form and make it easy to use. So labels. Do you remember what the label element is for? A label describes a form control. A visible and well-written label helps the user understand the purpose of form control. So use a label for every form control. Do you want to add a new form control to your form? Start by adding the label for the new field. This way you won't forget to add it. Adding labels first also helps you to focus on the form's goals. What data do I need here? Once this is clear, you can focus on helping the user enter data and complete the form. Never misuse placeholder attribute as well. The placeholder is meant for giving a hint about the type of data you should enter, not for describing a form control. Learn more about why you should consider avoiding placeholders. So avoiding placeholders is interesting. I haven't thought about that. Label wording. Say that you want to describe an email field. You could do as follows. So label for email, enter your email address, or you could describe it like this. Label for email, email address. Which description do you choose? For me it will be I know myself, and I will do the second one, but probably they say for our example the wording email address is preferred, since short labels are easier to scan, reduce visual clutter, and help users to understand what data is needed faster. So I thought the first one is going to be correct, but it seems like it's the second one. Label position. With CSS you can position a label on top, bottom, left and right for form control. Where do you place it? Research shows that best practice is to position the label above the form control so the user can scan a form quickly and see which label belongs to which form control. We have designing forms. A good design can significantly reduce form abandonment rates, help users enter data by using the appropriate element and input type. There are various form elements and input types you can choose from. To offer the best UX, use the most suitable element and input type for your use case. If the user should fill in multiple lines of text, use the text area. Where they need to accept your site's terms and conditions, use the input type checkbox. Depending on the type or input mode attribute, more about this later, a different on-screen keyboard is shown on touch devices. If you use type tel, users on touch devices get a keyboard showing only the characters needed to enter a telephone number. By using type email, the mobile device displays a keyboard optimized for entering an email address. You should also visually differentiate between different types of form controls. A button should look like a button, an input should look like an input. Make it easy for users to recognize the purpose of a form control. For example, if something looks like a link, clicking on it should open a new page, not submit a form. This is a demo showing how you shouldn't do it. Button should look like button. So in this case, the save button right here looks like a link, and you would assume that clicking the save would open up a different web page, but it doesn't. It submits the form. Okay. Help users navigate forms. An extravagant layout can be fun, but may get in the way of completing a form. In particular, research shows that it's best to use only a single column. Users don't want to spend time searching where the next form control is. By using one column, there is only one direction to follow. So this is pretty good advice indeed. Always ensure that forms are accessible for people who use only the keyboard to navigate websites, either through preference or circumstance. Test your form by only using keyboard navigation. The tab order should follow the visual order. You can view the source order in Chrome DevTools. Alright, pretty cool. Help users interact with forms. To avoid accidental taps and clicks and help users interact with your form, make your buttons big enough. The recommended tap target size of a button is at least 48 pixels. You should also add enough spacing between the form controls using the margin CSS property to help avoid accidental interactions. The default size of form controls is too small to be really usable. You should increase the size by using padding and changing the default font size. Alright. You can determine different sizes for different pointing devices. For example, a mouse using the pointer, CSS media feature. Show errors where they happen. To make it straightforward for your users to find out which form controls needs their attention, display error messages next to the form control they refer to. When displaying errors on form submission, make sure to navigate to the first invalid form control. Make it clear to users what data to enter. Make sure your users understand how to enter valid data. Do they need to enter at least 8 characters for a password? Tell them. Alright. Always assume that the user doesn't know how things work, basically. Assume that your user is either stupid or they're 8-year-old. And that will make it a lot easier for you and for your customers. Make it clear to users which fields are required. Okay. If a field is mandatory, make it obvious. The anatomy my voice is gone. The anatomy of accessible forms explains alternatives for indicating required fields. If most fields in a form are required, it may be better to indicate optional fields. So if you have more optional than required fields, then you should point the required ones in parentheses, and if you have more required than optional, only a few optional fields, then you should specify which ones are optional. I see that makes sense. Check your understanding again. How do you describe a form control? Using the label element. What's the recommended tap target screen size? 48 pixels. Where should you place error messages? At next to the form control. Alright, so this is also done. And next up we have accessibility, which is a big one. Alright. For some reason it refreshed the page, but it's okay. Alright, let me read through that. This is not what I opened. Accessibility, there you go. The form you built is for people. People use different devices. Some use a mouse, some a touch device, and some the keyboard. Some a device controlled by eye movements. Some use a screen reader, some a small screen, some use text enlargement software. Everybody wants to use your form. Learn how to make your form accessible and usable for everyone. Just a second. Okay. Ensure users understand the purpose of a form field. There are many form controls you can choose from. What do they all have in common? Every form control must have an associated label element. The label element describes the purpose of a form control. The label text is visually associated with the form control and read out by screen readers. In addition, tapping the label focuses the associated form control, making it a larger target. Note, next time you add a form control, add the label first. Think about the purpose of the form control and describe the purpose to the user. Make it easy for people to enter valid data quickly and accurately. So it's interesting that they say add the label first, because for example, when you add the label, you need to point it to the field. So how would you point it if you don't have the field yet? It's interesting. In theory, you can build a form only using div elements. You can even make it look like a native form. What's the problem with using non-semantic elements? Built-in form elements provide a lot of built-in features. Let's have a look at an example. Alright. Visually the input, no, they actually have a form. I was going to say they don't have a form element, but they do. Maybe it's for that button if they don't want to add JavaScript. But I think you can most definitely make a whole form just using the divs and so on and submit it with JavaScript. Okay, so visually the input, the first one in the example, and the div look the same. You can even insert text for both, as the div has a content editable attribute. So this what is it, name, input type text, and this is the second one with content editable. Alright. There are lots of differences though between using an appropriate input element and a div looking like an input. A screen reader user doesn't recognize the div as an input element and it isn't able to complete the form. All the screen reader user hears is name with no indication to that element is a form control for adding text. Clicking the div name doesn't focus div that goes with it, whereas label and the input are connected by using the for and id attributes. Alright, so if you click on name here, it doesn't focus the div, and if you click on name here, it focuses it. Although you can make all of this with JavaScript, but yeah, I guess it's just much easier to use the built-in ones that are already there. Okay. After submitting the form, the data entered in the div isn't included in the request. While attaching the data with JavaScript is possible, an input does that by default. Built-in form elements have other features, for example, with appropriate form elements and correct input mode or type, an on-screen keyboard shows appropriate characters. Using the input mode attribute on a div cannot do that. Ensure users are aware of expected data format. You can define various validation rules for a form control. For example, say a form field should always have at least 8 characters. Use the min length attribute indicating the validation rule to browsers. How can you ensure users also know about the validation rule? Tell them. Add information about the expected format directly beneath the form control to make it clear for assistive devices. Use the area described by attribute of the form control and an ID on the error message with the same value to connect both. Help users find the error message for a form control. In a previous module about validation, you learned how to show error messages in case of invalid data entry. For example, if a field has a required attribute and an invalid data is entered, the browser shows an error message next to the form control. When the form is submitted, screen readers also announce the error message. You can also define your own error message. This example needs more changes to connect the error message to the form control. A simple approach is to use the area described by attribute on the form control that matches the ID on the error message element, and then use area live assertive for the error message. Area live regions announce an error to screen reader users the moment the error is shown. The problem with this approach for forms with multiple fields is that area live will usually only announce the first error in the case of multiple errors. As explained in this article about multiple area live announcements on the same action, you could create a single message by concatenating all the errors. Another approach would be to announce that there are errors, then announce individual errors when the field is focused. Okay, ensure users recognize errors. Some designers color the invalid state red using the invalid pseudo class. However, to communicate an error or success, you should never rely on color. For people with red-green color blindness, a green and a red border almost look the same. It's impossible to see if the message is related to an error, which is kind of true. Indeed, I am red-green colorblind and I do have issues with that. In addition to color, use an icon to prefix your error messages with the error type. So please use at least 8 characters. And when they say icon, they mean putting error in strong or bolding error actually, and I guess that counts as an icon to them. Alright, so great. Thank you, Harish. Sorry if I butchered your name. If you just subscribe, brother, thank you so much. Truly appreciate you. Help users navigate your form first. You can change the visual order of form controls with CSS. A disconnect between visual order and keyboard navigation or DOM order is problematic for screen reader and keyboard users. Help users to identify the currently focused form control. Use your keyboard to navigate through this form. Alright, let's do that. Alright, so I click tab 2 times. Once it focuses the input field, and the next time I click tab, it submitted the form, but it doesn't do it again. Alright, so what they are on about. Did you recognize that the styling of the form controls changed once they were active? Yep. This is the default focus. You can overwrite it with the focus pseudo class. Whatever styles you use inside focus, always make sure to make sure the visual difference between the default state and the focus state is recognizable. If you want to remove the default focus styles but still show focus indicators, for your keyboard users, you can use the focus visible CSS suite class. So I've never heard about this focus visible, but seems like that's what it's used, so for keyboard users. All right, just 1 second. Ensure your form is usable. You can identify many common issues by filling out your form with different devices. Use only your keyboard, a screen reader, or zoom the page to 200%. Always test your forms on different platforms, especially devices or settings you don't use every day. Do you know someone using a screen reader or someone using text enlargement software? Ask them to fill out your form. Accessibility reviews are great. Testing with real users is even better. Perfect. So for this one we don't have any Q&A, and we were on accessibility and now on internalization and localization. Cool. But before that, I'm taking another break because I feel like I'm not very energetic, how you might say, but I need to take a quick break and I'll be right back to read through more articles. Alright, be right back in 10 minutes. See you. Alright. Let me bump up the light a little bit. It's only on my left side, and somehow I need to get it more in the middle, but there is just no room. There is the wall behind my desk, but yeah, we'll figure out if we'll be able to make that happen. Now let me close this, and we're on internalization and localization. Let me just check something quickly. Cool, okay. Alright, so if you're reading this, you're using the World Wide Web. Your forms may be used by people speaking different languages, people from different countries, and people with different cultural backgrounds. Learn how to prepare your form for internalization and localization. Ensure your form works in different languages. Let's see how you can make sure your form works with different languages. The first step is to make your site localization ready, is to define the language attribute like on the HTML element. This attribute enables screen readers to invoke the correct pronunciation and helps browsers offer a translation of the page in the defined language if the defined language is not the browser default language. Alright, so say you translated a form to German. How can you make sure search engines and browsers know about the translated version? You can add link elements to your site's head describing the alternate versions. So they have link with the rel of alternate, title, the form element, and they link to the form with the href1, href1, en, and de for Dutch, I guess. Help users who speak another language to use your form. You can't translate your form into every language, but you can ensure translation tools can translate it for you. Try it out. I guess they're speaking about this, or you have to translate here on the browser, but I'm not sure. Okay, thank you whoever subscribed, really appreciate you. Mwah. Thank you so much. Alright, so to ensure translation, tools translate all the text on your form. Make sure all text is defined in HTML and is visible. Some tools also work with content defined in JavaScript, but to improve comparability, try to include as much text as possible in your HTML. Avoid using the area label attribute to describe elements. Many translation tools aren't able to translate the area label attribute. Learn more why area label doesn't translate. Ensure your form works with different writing systems. Different languages use different writing systems and character sets. Some scripts are written from left to right and some right to left. Make spacing independent of writing systems. To ensure your form works for different writing systems, you can use CSS local properties. So I guess if my system rolled from right to left, that would have been swapped the other way around. And what I was thinking was I don't remember how you say that, but the blinking indicator here would be in the middle, and when you start typing it won't matter. So the input has a border thickness of 1 pixel on one side, except the left side where the border is 4 pixels thick. Now edit the code pen and change the writing system to right to left by adding dir RTL, which means right to left, to the main element. Okay. The dir attribute indicates the direction of an element's text. If the complete site uses the same writing system, define the dir attribute on the HTML element. In CodePen you don't have access to the HTML element, which is why you need to add it to the main. You can also use CSS direction property to achieve the same result. The tick border is now on the right side. That's because we've defined the border using walkout property. Border inline start with. So I didn't know about this property either. That's something new. Learn more about walkout properties. Ensure your form can handle different name formats. Say you have a form where your user should fill in their name. How would you add the field to your form? You can add one field for the first name and one for the surname. However, names are different around the world. For example, some people don't have a surname, so how should they fill in the surname field? To make it quick and easy to enter their names and to ensure everybody can enter their name, whatever format, use a single form element for names whenever possible. Okay, I do understand what they said here, but for example, in my e-commerce website, we're only working in Bulgaria and we need the second and last name in order to ship the product. So I've done it in two separate fields because I need both to ship the products and those are mandatory. It would have been easier sort of and easier for me and for the users if there would have been just one field, but some people will not enter it correctly, so we must have two in that case. But whenever there is a possibility, you can use one field. Okay, learn more about personal names. I'm curious to where that will take me. W3C. That's interesting that they wrote a whole article on personal names. Web.dev. Okay. If you have a name with non-Latin characters, you may have encountered the issue that your name is reported as invalid in some forms. When you build forms, make sure to allow all possible characters and do not assume that a name only consists of Latin characters. Allow variety of address formats. The headquarters of Google is at 1600 Amphitheater Parkway, Mountain View, California, so on. This address includes the street number, street, city, state, postal code, and country. In your country, the address format may be totally different. How can you ensure everyone can enter their address in your form? One way is to use generic inputs. Okay, check your understanding. So how do you invoke the correct pronunciation for screen readers? It is with the lang attribute in the HTML. How can you change the writing system on your website? The dir, which is direction you write. Alright, perfect. So we've gone through 9 articles and I think I'm going to stop the stream for now because I ain't feeling too well, but either today, later on today, or tomorrow we're going to continue and I'm going to do longer streams. Probably I'm going to read through this off stream because it will be quicker when I don't have to speak it out loud, but I'll make sure next stream is more entertaining. Thank you for tuning in today and until next time, peace.